I'm Dr. J.W.A. a masonry contractor, just a Australian civilian. And we have to declare that, I'm going to declare that Australia's politically, morally bankrupt. She's gone. The consequences of mass, oversaturated and negligent migration across the Western world with a focus on Australia. Political moral bankruptcy occurs when governments continue mass migration policies after the consequences have become visible. Public fear, social fragmentation, overwhelmed infrastructure, failed assimilation, cultural disorder, and preventable violence against citizens. This is not merely policy failure, it's moral failure. Because when leaders know the risks, see the consequences, hear the public concern, and still protect the policy before protecting the people, they cross from incompetence into negligence. Opening condemnation, the government's first duty has been betrayed. The government's first duty has been betrayed. A government does not exist first to satisfy global opinion. It does not exist first to protect ideological branding. It does not exist first to please activist institutions. It exists first to protect its people. And when citizens can no longer trust streets, shopping centres, train schools, parks, petrol stations, hospitals, and neighbourhoods, the immigration debate has already changed. It's no longer about compassion. It's about exposure. The citizen has become the testing ground for political theory. Point number 2, the oversaturation problem. Mass migration becomes negligent when its intake exceeds national capacity. That's happened in Australia. Capacity includes housing, hospitals, schools, policing, employment absorption, language integration, cultural assimilation, criminal history verification, ideological risk screening, and public order screening, public order enforcement. When government ignores these limits, they do not create diversity, they create pressure. And pressure becomes disorder. Disorder becomes fear, and fear becomes public rage. The random violence shock. Random violence is socially catastrophic because it destroys predictability. A citizen can avoid known danger. They cannot avoid unknown danger. The elderly woman on a footpath, the child in a shopping centre, the worker on a public transport, the father walking to his car, the nurse leaving night shift. The random civilian becomes a recipient of policy failure. And when a violent offender with migrant status attacks a stranger, citizens do not only see one criminal act, they see a chain of political negligence. Who admitted him? Who vetted him? Who monitored him? Who failed to deport him? Who silenced the public concern before the attack occurred? Point number 4, cultural collision and failed assimilation. Settlement is not assimilation. A visa is not cultural transformation. Residency is not loyalty. Employment is not integration. A nation cannot safely import large populations while refusing to demand adaptation to the host culture. If newcomers are not required to submit national law, civic values, public conduct standards, and social expectations, the host nation becomes fragmented. And parallel communities emerge. Imported conflicts survive. Different assumptions about violence, women, law, authority, religion, honour, and free speech enter the public square, and the state then tells citizens to tolerate consequences it refused to prevent. Now, what you'll get is immigrants that can overtly assimilate. But covertly, culturally, they may be able to assimilate to a certain percentage, but can't reculturalize after that percentage of capability is reached. And what happens is they manifest at different periods their culture. Instead of remaining covertly unintegrated, you'll get an overt burst. It's called an overt unintegration burst, where you'll get a manifestation, a random manifestation of a culture that just does not fit within the Western world. Number 5, Australia's specific warning. Australia's specific warning. This is what I'm worried about, because I'm Australian and we're at the point here where I tell my partner and daughters and relatives, do not go out into public without being fully aware who's around you and what's going on. Because these random violent unintegration bursts are hitting people that are totally unaware, and it's costing lives and causing severe damage. Now, Australia must not pretend distance protects it. The same Western pattern is already visible. Housing stress, infrastructure strain, hospital overload, suburban fragmentation, contested nationality identity, political fear of naming, cultural incompatibility, growing distrust of institutions, rising concern over public safety, elite contempt towards citizen anxiety. Australia's danger is a political class that assumes every social consequence can be managed after entry. And that assumption has been catastrophic. Number 6, the moral bankruptcy of political language. Governments use soft language to hide hard consequences. They say community tension or disorder. They say integration challenge instead of failed assimilation. They say isolated incident instead of public safety breach. They say misinformation when citizens ask basic questions. They say diversity while citizens experience fragmentation. And this language management becomes morally bankrupt when it protects the policy from scrutiny while citizens carry the risk. Number 7, viewers, the victim hierarchy. The victim hierarchy. One of the deepest public angers is the perception that victims are politically inconvenient. When a national citizen is harmed, the system often appears more concerned with preventing backlash than explaining failure. And the public notices. They notice slow disclosure. They notice selective caution. They notice controlled wording. They notice moral lectures directed at the public before facts are released. And this creates a poisonous conclusion. The citizen feels less protected than the narrative. Number 8, the condemning political verdict. The condemning political verdict. The charge is severe. Western governments have confused compassion with recklessness. They have confused tolerance with surrender. They have confused diversity with disorder. They have confused border weakness with moral virtue. They have confused public silence with consent. And now citizens are beginning to understand the cost. A nation can welcome strangers, but it cannot sacrifice its own people to prove its kindness. This is my final statement. Political moral bankruptcy begins when governments defend the immigration system more fiercely than they defend the citizens forced to live under its failures. I'm going to say that again. Write it down. The government The political moral bankruptcy begins when governments defend the immigration system more fiercely than they defend the citizens forced to live under its failure. The political moral bankruptcy begins when governments defend the immigration system more fiercely than they defend the citizens forced to live under its failures.